Welcome back. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi held an hour-long meeting in the Indonesian city of Bali earlier today, focusing on the outstanding border dispute in eastern Ladakh, the issue of return of Indian students to China, and the resumption of direct flights between the two countries. The talks took place on the sidelines of a meeting of the foreign ministers of the G20 countries. Mr. Jaishankar tweeted that the talks focused on specific outstanding issues pertaining to the boundary situation in an oblique reference to the over 2-year-old military standoff along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. Remember, India has been pressing for quick disengagement of troops from all the remaining friction points in eastern Ladakh to ensure de-escalation of the situation, asserting that peace and tranquility along the line of actual control are prerequisites for progress in overall ties. Remember, India-China ties remain important and significant for various reasons. To understand the significance of the talks held today, I have two experts here on the program joining me this evening. Captain Alok Bansal, Director of India Foundation, and also Suresh Kumar Goel, former ambassador. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Very good evening. I'll just quickly go across to my colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary to give us an update on the talks and what came out of it. Srinjoy, good evening. Take us through the major takeaways and what transpired in the talks, please.
The Indian position is very clear. The talks, the relationship cannot move forward till this border issue is sorted out. Now, after what happened 2 years ago in Western Ladakh, one friction point remains vis-a-vis from that period, and that is PP-15. Now, we know what the position, where the Chinese are, we know where we are, and we don't want the Chinese where they are. That point is very clear. There are two other friction points, but they go back to several years ago. They relate to Depsang and Chushul. Now the important point is that there has to be a meeting between Lieutenant General Sengupta, the 14th Corps commander, and his equivalent on the Chinese side, because the WMCC meeting has been over. Wang Yi has met Jaishankar this time. They met, well, not face-to-face, but at least virtually during BRICS. And also Wang Yi came to India not that long ago. The important point now is to look at these three friction points: PP-15, Depsang, Chushul. At least PP-15, according to people in the armed forces, people in government, is probably easier to deal with. And if you can deal with that, then clearly other things will happen. The relationship will go forward. As far as the things you spoke about flights and students, both relate to us in a sense to COVID. So those things have to happen. The Chinese are still struggling with COVID. As you know, Shanghai was closed, Beijing was closed, and so on. So the important point vis-a-vis the Wang Yi Jaishankar discussion really relates to Western Ladakh. And the point is very clear. You have 50,000 troops in that area. You move out. There, of course, things have improved. There was a time when the Chinese had 99 tanks in one valley alone. I'm talking tanks, and 99 of them in one valley. So you can imagine what the situation was like. And it wasn't just tanks, it was armored personnel carriers, it was air defense equipment, it was artillery, it was all kinds of things. So India has a complete list of that. And it is very clear that while things have improved, and Jaishankar actually said that, the things have to go back to normal as they were on 30th of April 2 years ago. If that happens, then the relationship can go forward. If it doesn't, then we are stuck the way we are.
Absolutely. Srinjoy, thanks for giving us the entire context of this particular round of talks that's happening. There have been several rounds of talks earlier as well. Let me now go across to our experts. Captain Alok Bansal, if I may begin with you. The Chinese military build-up has been in the discourse for quite some time. The opposition has been targeting the Modi-led Sarkar often enough on this issue. Can you tell us, despite so many rounds of talks, the fact that the elephant in the room often is not addressed. The Chinese incursions, the disengagement, which now, as we just heard, can lead to de-escalation. But are you convinced that we are on the right track, or, eventually it is through talks first, through diplomatic channels first, that the military de-escalation can happen?
See, firstly, we need to be very clear as to what Dr. Jaishankar said. He said that the relationship could be based on 3 M's, where he talked of mutual respect, mutual sensitivities, and mutual interest. And then he, of course, went on to say that they focused on specific outstanding issues. And when we talk of specific outstanding issues, this is the issue of Eastern Ladakh, where we had very tumultuous period in last few years. And I think we expect China to disengage completely. Having said that, we need to understand that this is a time where Chinese feel that they need to engage with India, because they have seen very clearly that India has pursued an independent foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine war. And as far as this particular war is concerned, China finds itself on virtually the same wicket as India. But we feel that as long as this issue of Eastern Ladakh is not resolved, and of course, if you look at it in the macro thing, these are small issues, but very, very important ones. Patrol Point 15, where Indian patrolling team used to go a few years back, of course, and now Chinese have a different perception. And Depsang also, the Chinese had acknowledged in 2014 that there are differing perceptions on line of actual control, and that's why the incursion took place. So these issues need to be resolved. And I think from India's point of view, as far as Chinese buildup is concerned, we have also strengthened our positions, and we are in a position to give a befitting reply, and that's China has realized it. And I think China also realizes that India is no pushover, and I think they respect our strength, and I think that's why we are now moving forward. In fact,
Yes.
there are very clear indications that China wants some resolution of the issues. But
because, when it comes to agreements, when it comes to treaties, when it comes to protocols, it has been set before, and which is why I'm running in our graphics the number of resolution mechanism that is already in place. The fact that there should be friction points and incursions goes to show that perhaps some of it has not been honored. And I see now that both sides, again, in a joint statement, has said that the idea is to honor the protocols already established. Ambassador Goel, do you believe that there needs to be more in that sense in terms of resolution mechanism, and that can be done through these diplomatic talks?
Absolutely. I think as far as the mechanisms are concerned, we have plenty of mechanisms on ground. We have several agreements. We have established a whole structure to resolve bilateral issues, to resolve where we stand together in terms of the line of actual control, how do we deal with the differences, and so on and so forth. When the Honorable External Affairs Minister talked about mutual sensitivities, mutual respect, etc., there is one thing which he has said before, but didn't say it now, and that is mutual trust. And the problem, I think, now is that there is no mutual trust now. At least India does not trust China. There is a huge trust deficit in terms of Chinese statements, Chinese signatures on various agreements, and actual Chinese behavior on ground. And that's a reason that when we talk about status quo 2 years ago, the whole idea is that China has to go back to the situation that existed before incursions into Ladakh, so that we know that China has finally agreed to abide by the understanding. And I'm not just saying agreement. I'm talking about the understanding that existed between India and China prior to that period. I think that's a whole issue. That is number one. Number two, I do think that China is making an extra effort to see where it can go further in the relationship with India. It has not really shown any great forward movement in terms of restoring the trust, which it could easily do by withdrawing its troops from PP-15, by not undertaking any further construction of infrastructure or military establishments in the area, which was actually free for patrolling by Indian troops earlier. It's not doing anything of that kind. And therefore, if China is keen to restore the trust, to
Yes.
restore the relationship as it was 2 years ago, it has to show some movement.
Yes,
those areas.
and on that point, the fact is, Captain Alok Bansal, that there have been troop movement. It's all there on record. It's visible. It has been reported widely. Now, as you heard Ambassador Goel saying, that there must be withdrawal of those troops to restore trust. How long is that going to take? What are the appropriate channels through which it can really happen?
We are going to have Corps Commanders meeting and we will work out, because it will have to be mutual withdrawal, because let's be frank, the troop levels have been built up on both sides, obviously, which is a normal situation after a confrontation like the one which we experienced in Galwan. So we have to withdraw, and it has to be simultaneous and mutual. So that will have to work out. We cannot do it unilaterally. And I think all these interactions between foreign ministers is actually a precursor to the actual event taking place. I agree, Chinese have really not done much, but they have of late been giving the signs that they are keen on a rapprochement with India. That clear indication that we have been getting for some time. And I think it is just a matter of time before they actually commit to some sort of a mutual withdrawal from the friction points.
The point about status quo, Ambassador Goel, that every time there are talks and then if there is no resolution, the common consensus is, okay, let's go with status quo for now. And the next thing you know, the status quo is breached. And there are another round of talks. Is this somewhere a vicious cycle that we are seeing, a pattern that has set in when it comes to India-China military relations at least?
I think basically in the Chinese minds, the calculus is, so what if you do not withdraw? What can India do? Eventually, the Chinese withdrawal will take place when they understand that they have no option but to withdraw, and that point has not yet been reached. I think we made a mistake when we withdrew from the Kailash Heights, because that was the pressure point that we had. But anyway, that has happened. Now, I think basically the pressure point really is development of strategic situation in Indo-Pacific after the Ukraine war. I think China is feeling under pressure and they want to develop their multilateral linkages in a way that China can stand up to this situation and the pressure from the Western Bloc. But whether that pressure will help in resolving India-China issue is yet to be seen. So far, unless we develop a strong enough leverage for China to really understand that there's no option, I have my doubts.
Okay. So, there is, of course, a lot of ground to be covered when it comes to actually converging on a situation between India and China where both can agree. The talks, therefore, will have to go on, and that's probably the only way, at least you have the diplomatic channels open for both sides. I appreciate your joining us, Captain Alok Bansal and Ambassador Suresh Goel, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Let's take a short